Okay, we're live, we're back. It's the afternoon now, 3 o'clock, and we have another show with someone far away. We've had a show with somebody this morning, Russell Kohler in Istanbul, why not? And then we had a show with Marco Mangelsdorf in Beijing, make that Shanghai. And now we have a show with Marya Dzmitruk, and she is in San Francisco, but she is doing a lot of traveling anyway. So all I have to say to you, Marya, is Здравствуйте.
Well, good afternoon, Jay. Thank you for having me on the show. It's, as always, my pleasure.
Great to have you. So we saw you in February where you did a show just on the eve of your departure from Hawaii for Russia. And then you were there for a while, and then you came back to the United States and to San Francisco, where you're working for Okta. So you studied international relations and security, I think it was, when you were at HPU. So tell us the story of your life since then.
Okay. Well, we did speak last when I was in Moscow, and that was in the cold month of February for Russia. Mm-hmm. And after that, I came back to the United States, went back to Hawaii, packed my books into my boxes, and moved back to the Bay Area, San Francisco, where I graduated high school initially. Mm-hmm. And I just realized very quickly that being so close to Silicon Valley, it would be a shame not to dip my foot into the IT world. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, I've recently joined Okta family, and if you were to tell me a year ago that I would be a part of IT environment, I wouldn't believe you for a second, because I was always interested in the people and their well-being, and thought that tech world really lacks human interaction inside and out. And I'm very pleased to say that I'm glad I was wrong.
So now you're happily ensconced at Okta. What is Okta exactly?
Well, it's a foundation for secure connections between people and technology, to be very broad. So not so disconnected from humans after all, but to kind of evaluate on that, in today's world, technology is evolving so quickly that something that was new yesterday is already outdated by the time you grab lunch tomorrow. Yeah. So, we started out with hardware, and then we turned to software, and today our desktops turned into mobile devices like tablets and phones. And as these changes are happening, we need to make sure that identities of those using these convenient resources are secure. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do here at Okta. We provide that secure connection. Okay,
so that means that Okta is in cybersecurity.
You could say so, yes.
Okay. And is that global cybersecurity, or is it just the U.S.?
We have offices in Europe. Mm-hmm. We have headquarters here in San Francisco, offices in Toronto, Amsterdam, Sydney, London, and Seattle. And we have clients and customers across the globe.
Gee whiz. Is it an American company, Okta?
Yes.
Is it a public company or private company?
We are private as of today.
Okay.
We're founded in 2009.
That's a good answer, because what you're leaving open is whether they could be public tomorrow.
Well, that's a conversation we can have in 6 months, 12 months.
Okay, let's postpone that to our next call.
All right, sounds good.
So, gee whiz, so how did you apply to them? Is that what happened? And then you got into, what was it, a sales development representative job over there. How did you get connected with this cybersecurity company?
Well, I was always the outcast of the family. I come from a family of engineers and scientists and people who are so connected with technology. And my mother, she actually works in the Silicon Valley. She's a quality assurance engineer. Mm-hmm. And when I moved back to San Francisco, I was just surrounded by people who were in the IT world. And I decided, why not? Let's try this. So Okta was one of the top companies that I researched to work for. And it was definitely the right fit and the right decision for me, because not only is this a great solution and product, and of course I'm being slightly biased here because I work for the company, but to be quite honest, inside and out, this company has very rich culture, great solution, great people, and great cause that we work for.
So if I'm a potential client, what do you say to me about the kind of cybersecurity protection you could give me?
So it would really depend on the IT environment that you have, because we can pause here for a minute and take a look at the different security threats that companies face today. Before, the IT landscape was looking at viruses, which was the bane of the IT administrator's existence. But today, they're the least of their worries. You're looking at targeted cyber attacks, which are type of an attack that extract intel over a long period of time. So it may not even be one hack into a system, but a repeated scaled intrusion where sensitive data is retrieved and misused. And another one would be data breaches. This goes from intentional leaks from disgruntled employees to blunders involving misplaced laptops, somebody going to a restaurant or a bar and forgetting their company laptop there, or leaving it at the airport. And you would not believe how many cases of that I've heard in my work. So it's not, it really depends on what spectrum you have in terms of how you are using your internal technology. So you being the ThinkTech in Hawaii, you might want to keep certain reports that you have with people who are currently in China or people who are currently in Turkey of the shows that are not live. You might want to keep those private because it would compromise the security of that person while they're in the country. So what would happen if somebody got a hand on those reports and published them, right? Then you're compromising not only the security of your company, but also the safety of those people. So what Okta would be able to do is to provide you that additional layer of security to make sure that only trusted resources, trusted people, trusted employees have access to those applications. And you can even monitor from where they have access to those applications. So maybe they're outside of the office, they would not be able to log in and retrieve that data.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of ways in these days, more than there used to be. But, and I remember we once had a hacker on my radio show. He was a real hacker. And he had actually spent time in jail. He was a famous hacker. And so he appeared on the radio show, and we asked him, how did you get in? How did you? And he said, well, in those days anyway, in large part it was social engineering. Yeah, he would call somebody in a company, anybody, and chat them up on some pretense or another. He'd find out the schema for who was running the company. He'd call someone else, and he would say to that person, I just talked to the first person, and he'd sort of hopscotch around the company and get more information all the time. And then one day he'd call him up and say, I forgot my password. I wonder if you can help me with that. And they would give it to him. And then he would get in on some social engineering basis. It was really amazing. And he managed to do this in very creative ways. I don't know if it's like that anymore. Probably it's not like that anymore. I don't think that the North Koreans use that kind of approach on Sony. But I wonder how these attacks that we worry about so much these days are being effectuated. Are they with social engineering? Are they trying to get behind a firewall? How do they do it?
So there are several ways. Like I mentioned, there are internally disgruntled employees that they may not be happy with what's going on at the company, and they want to get their hands on the sensitive information, kind of flush it out to the world, and kind of what we had happen with WikiLeaks a few years back. About 50% of data breaches today are inside jobs, which is very frightening.
Is that right? 50% are still inside jobs, huh?
Yes, okay. Yes, according to the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report. And another thing would be social networks. And this is something that's a bit more tricky because the leak is happening and the person may not even know that they're causing it. So that's why most of the educational institutions don't allow access to social media like Facebook, or they have very limited access to certain websites because those websites were proven to not have a lot of security around pop-ups. And So two of the biggest social networks that hackers are using would be Facebook and Twitter. And when employees access those from company devices, they're leaking company data without intention. Because not only are those applications vulnerable by themselves, they also seep into the corporate networks, and people often post private information using those outlets, thinking that it's their social account and they can say whatever, but often that's not the case. You might have heard about a recent Facebook intern who leaked some of the information prior to it being actually public, and that cost him his job. So again, it's intertwined between being social network and internal employee.
Yeah, well, I wonder though, I mean, if you go on social networks and all, you have to do a lot of reading to find anything good. Are there techniques for reading these social networks and finding words, some magic words like password, like username, like access code?
I would hope that people who access social networks on their company devices have common sense, where if they're prompted for their email and password, they would not enter it, or they would wait until it's lunchtime and go to a local Starbucks and still not post any company information in their newsfeed.
Yeah.
These hackers are technology is getting smarter by minute, hackers are getting smarter by second.
Yeah.
So, you really have to be careful and kind of understand the threats that you're exposing yourself, your position at the company, and the company itself too.
What about the guy who drives by my house and he has a laptop in his car and he scans on my IP address, my wireless address, and he finds a way to crack my wireless address, and now he's watching my keystrokes as I'm logging into this or that or the other thing. Does that happen much?
Other than Hollywood movies, I really haven't seen use cases like that.
Okay.
I've
It strikes me that there are people who know how to do that and who, reputedly park in front of your house and watch your keystrokes, and then they get in on you, and whatever information is passing back and forth between you and whoever it is, they're getting it. And if you're logging on to something, well, then they're logging on. They see what you're doing to log on. So now they have your username and password. And what I was thinking is that if they can do that outside, your house, they can do it at the next table in the employee dining room too. They can do it in the next carrel in the office. All they got to do is be, able to get in on your wireless.
So that's why we have a part of the solution is to secure your wireless network. So you would be able to see who is tapping into it and either allow or discard access.
Yeah, scary.
It's very terrifying, thinking that, as we evolve and all of these great things come out, like we have the Apple Watch, convenient time on your hand, and we have all these other devices that are coming out, and we're just moving so fast into this technology world and technology is replacing some of the human interaction even today, that we are starting to really lack that safety and security of having to, before some processes were very manual. You had to go to 50 years ago, you're going to a bank and you have to talk to a person to request a credit card or a loan of some sort. And today you can go online and the information may not even belong to you, or you may not even be doing that to an actual bank. It might be a, kind of a layover website that takes over your information, and then your identity is compromised. So it's very tricky today.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, let's take a short break, moving very fast. And when we come back, I'd like to talk about who is doing this, who is compromising us, who is spending the time and money and has such a nasty approach that they would spend their time compromising us. That's Marya Dzmitruk. She's a field sales development representative at Okta Inc., and she's an HPU alumni. We'll be right back after this short break.
Hi, my name's Cindy Matsuki, and I host the show High Growth with HTDC on ThinkTech Hawaii. This is the show where we talk about all things tech, innovation, entrepreneurship, and manufacturing, because there's so many things going on in Hawaii and more people should know about them. So this is the program that you can come and find out about all the things happening in Hawaii. And this show also airs on Olelo 54 along with ThinkTech Hawaii.
Hi, Jay.
Hi, Keith.
My name's Keith Bettinger.
I knew that.
And I'm the host of ThinkTech Asia.
I knew that too.
Here on ThinkTech.
Fabulous. You got a great show going, Keith.
Thank you very Aloha! How you doing? It's me, Angus McTech, wishing you to welcome and join us to see us on Hibachi Talk on ThinkTech Hawaii. Join my co-hosts, Gordo the Tech Czar and Andrew the Security Guy, every Friday from 1300 to 1345. We look forward to seeing you. We'll talk tech and we'll have some wee bit of fun. And remember, let your wing gang free wherever you be. Aloha!
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Marya Dzmitruk. She's field sales development representative at Okta Inc., which is a cybersecurity firm in San Francisco, and she's an HPU alumnus. And we're talking about the IT security spectrum with her today. She joins us from San Francisco by Skype audio, because she can't get through on video, but that's okay. It's not the company.
Well, thank you, Jay. It's good to be back. So I have a list of countries, top 10 countries where the most cyber attacks originate. And I kind of put it together in a backwards, moving from the lowest percentage of world attacks to the highest, kind of trying to intrigue the listener here of who's going to be in the top 3. So at number 10, with 1.4% of world attacks, we have Hungary.
Hungary?
Absolutely, we have Hungary. At 1.6, taking the 9th place, we have Italy. And the number actually dropped down from its high peak of 1.9 a year ago. At 2.3% and taking 8th spot is India. It also took a drop of 0.7% in 2012. Number 7, Romania, with an increase, actually, of world attacks from 2.6 in 2012 to 2.8 today. We have Brazil at number 6. We have Taiwan at 3.7%.
Oh, that's high, huh?
But it's a decrease from a 7.5% in 2012.
What causes a decrease? It means that other people are doing it more actively. And you're doing it the same, but they're jumping ahead of you.
I would hope that the decrease is caused by the government taking actions, and the people who are originating these attacks are being caught.
I hope so, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Absolutely. So number 4, with 4.3%, which is a decrease from 6.8% in 2012, we have Russia. Number 3 is taken by Turkey at 4.7% of world attacks. And number 2 might come surprising to you, but number 2 and at 10%, we have United States.
It's all those kids sitting in their basements. They used to play computer games. Now they do this.
Yeah, well, actually, United States is home to members of some of the world's most notorious hacker groups, including Anonymous and Anti-Sec. And at number 1, with 41% of world cyber attacks, we have China.
China, number 1. That's almost 5 times the U.S.
Yes.
No kidding. That is, we have to explore that. So let me go back and ask you a few questions.
Okay.
Okay, number 1, Russia. You know, way back when I had some websites and they were hacked by a nice group of guys out of Vladivostok. But I'd heard that there were a lot of Russian hacks going on in Western Russia, near the border with Eastern Europe. And I wonder if you have any information on that. Is it coming from the west of Russia, the east of Russia, all over Russia? Who's doing it?
I mean, Russia is huge.
Yeah, yes.
If you look at the map, it's very big.
Yeah.
Vladivostok is actually more to the east of the country, and one thing that I have to point out, and I'm not defending Russia here, but often hackers know how to reroute the IP address to even point at another country. So I can be sitting in South Africa and use an IP address that will register as if I'm sitting in Russia, as if I'm sitting in France or elsewhere, but I'm actually somewhere else, like on another continent. But to go back to the Russia question, I think that it's equally spread out because we have the West looking at Europe and we have the East looking at Asia.
So, yeah, now the U.S., do you have any idea whether this is East Coast, West Coast? Is it urban? Is it rural? Is it all over the place?
There was actually recently an interactive map posted that shows cyber attacks in the moment. So you can see all of the cyber attacks that are being registered globally. So you just have this black map of the world and there are little lights shining, showing that where it's originating from and where it's going at. And when I looked over at the US at that time, which was about 2 weeks ago, it was mostly East Coast.
Ah, interesting. You know, there was a show on 60 Minutes, I guess it was yesterday, about the work that DARPA was doing, technology agency. And DARPA is a big deal, they got a big budget, and they have designed systems that look like what you described, maps that look like computer games, maps that flash at you real time when somebody is being hacked or hacking. It's very interesting. We have much more sophistication now. And I guess the question that comes out of that discussion with DARPA is a question I would put to you, and that is, you know, the internet is flawed, that it allows this sort of thing. And there are some who feel that we ought to throw the whole thing out and start again fresh so that hackers cannot mask their identities, they cannot mask their locations, so that everyone has to be signed on and, you know, verified before they can even have access to the internet. And in that way, you know, nobody will be able to hack anonymously anymore. How do you feel about that? How does Okta feel about that?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of Okta on this particular question, but I can express my opinion. And honestly, I don't see it being something that would work. The reason being is because we have 7 billion people, roughly over, of population here on the planet. We have, even if we say 1 billion people only have access to computers, do you really think that it's possible to create 1 billion online identities that will not be repeated? So let's say you create one and then you forget your password or you forget the email or whatever credential you used to log in, and then you just recreate another one. So already you're sitting at 2 identities. So how would a hacker not be able to replicate a fake identity? And that's the question that I have.
Yeah. Well, that's what the fellow from DARPA said too, that there was no need to recreate the internet, that it's just a matter of coming up with smarter software. And of course, the hackers will do the same, and that suggests we'll be involved in this cycle for a long time. Does Okta ever get involved in testifying in cases where the government is seeking to, make criminal charges against hackers? Does Okta ever get involved in that?
You know, I cannot answer that question, and the only reason why is because I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I think that would be more appropriate to direct it to our legal team. Yeah.
Well, it strikes me that there are not a lot of prosecutions. You know, that I think that most countries that care about, containing hacking, they just counter-hack, or they find ways to defend their systems better. But they don't spend their time actually prosecuting anyone. So the result, the net effect, is that there are very few prosecutions, the prosecutions are treated as white-collar crime rather than, violent crime, and therefore the penalties are not nearly as stiff. It keeps getting bigger and better. The hackers are essentially operating without accountability. They can't be found, as you say. They can take on multiple identities, multiple, credentials. And second, if they ever are found, which is very hard, that the prosecution is sort of dishwater, and so they don't really go to jail. So we have a whole generation of hackers, especially in countries where somehow it pays to be a hacker, and nobody is really trying to stop them. Am I right about that?
Well, I wouldn't say that people are not trying to stop them, because governments definitely have, legal ways to go about it, because it's definitely not welcome to be a hacker. It is a very much illegal activity. But the question is, how do you prosecute somebody who attacks an account in the United States and the hacker is from China, if they have different legislation on the crime? So that's where it becomes tricky. It's not. I wouldn't say that it's kind of wiped under the carpet, but it's just the complication of having an American security breach coming from another country, and how do you combine the two legislations and the two laws that were broken, and how do you come out with the proper punishment?
Yeah, I agree that when the boundaries come down more and the world comes more together on a global basis, there'll be a way, there'll be international organizations that can do something about this. Now, you mentioned a couple of websites out there that are hacker websites. And my recollection is that there are places, maybe places that would be actually obvious, where you can find software that will let you be a hacker, enable you as a hacker. I remember once I did this as an exercise, and it took me about 5 minutes to find software that would let me be a hacker. And you didn't have to be a genius to run this software. It would let you hack into somebody else's site just for fun, or find out more about your friends without them knowing about it. So you mentioned a couple of sites, and I wonder, could I go on those sites now? Could I, as an ordinary person, could I get on these hacking sites and either get the software to hack, or, more interestingly, get the data that somebody else hacked?
Well, I mentioned websites that show hacks that are happening in the moment. I personally don't have a list of websites that allow you or help you, aid you in your hacking endeavors. This is not something that has been of personal interest to me, only because it is illegal.
I'm glad to hear that, Marya.
Thank you. But I'm sure that there's definitely information that you can get online that has not been obtained legally, meaning that it was a leak or it was published by those who have hacked the account initially. Yeah. I wouldn't be able to give you a list off the top of my head. I would have to research it myself.
Yeah, okay, well, but I guess the point is it can be researched. This is
Absolutely.
not impossible to find.
Oh, you can find anything on the internet today.
Yeah, including the dark internet, the under internet, where there are illegal, if not immoral, things going on. I think the government spends a certain amount of time looking for pornography, and according to this DARPA article on 60 Minutes, the government has actually got new tools to do that. The government is also, using the same tools, finding people who are networking on hacking. But one of the questions that comes up out of that is, what kind of a market do we have? I mean, it's easy to see a market on pornography. There's always a certain amount of people in the world who want that and are willing to pay for it. But what about information that's been hacked? Is there a place I can go to sell my information? How do I get into that market?
I mean, I can only answer it from the perspective of a person who works with providing security.
Uh-huh.
I'm not on the other side, and I hope that I will never be on the other side. Not as a not
Well,
as a
usually it
partner,
works
not
the
as a
other way.
victim.
Usually the hackers come in from the cold. In other words, the successful hackers come to the cybersecurity companies and they say, you know, I know a lot about this. Why don't you hire me? And I know that's not you. I know that's not you. but you know, they wind up going legitimate based on what they learned when they were hacking. No, I mean, you know, if I have information that I hacked, who knows what it is? And assuming there's a market out there, and I want to ask you in a minute, what is that market? Where do we know where to go for that? Is that easy to find also?
Again, Jay, this is a question that's outside of my expertise.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm sure that there are a lot of outlets to push that information out. And I would hope that the governments of these top 10 countries that I've listed earlier are working very hard to make sure that we have less and less outlets to push that information out to.
Okay, so we're going to take a short break again. Marya Dzmitruk, Field Sales Development Representative at Okta in San Francisco. And when we come back, I'd like to ask you, you know, what is the demand for the information that is traded on the net? In other words, who wants it? And what is it used for when they get it? I'm sure that's going to be a scary answer. We'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Kirsten Baumgart-Turner, and I host Sustainable Hawaii every Tuesday from 11 a.m. to 12 noon. My guests offer insights on challenging economic and environmental issues facing our state and offer innovative solutions to increasing Hawaii's long-term sustainability. Recently, we've been focusing on sustainable land development, food, and energy security. If you have a project or issue you'd like to discuss on the show or would like to be a guest, please contact me at kirstenbturner@gmail.com and tune in live weekly or view the show at your convenience at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.
Okay, we're back. We're live with Marya Dzmitruk. She's with Okta Inc. in San Francisco, dealing in cybersecurity. So just to continue on that thread for a minute, Marya, who wants this? Who would buy information that, say, is hacked from, you know, say the government, say the U.S. government? Lord knows we lost enough information from government files recently. Who wants it?
You know, my best guess would be that governments that are not in very friendly situations would want the information. I would also imagine that private businesses, undergrounds, black markets would want the information. Kind of to reform the question, like what businesses are facing threats, like what outlets out there are facing threats. You know, the short answer would be all of them. It's simple as that. There isn't a single company out there today that could say that they did not or do not face any cybersecurity threats. You know, government institutions, academic institutions, financial institutions, medical institutions, you name it. They're all either have faced a threat or facing a threat today.
That's scary, but you know, so I say to myself, well, you got 50 million fingerprints. So what? What are you going to do with the fingerprints? Who would want to go to the trouble for that? Doesn't tell you that much. There's some hacking going on where you really wonder about the market, and you wonder whether they're doing it in order to participate in that market or just for fun, just to be mischievous. You know, that was the case in the early hacking, hacking generations, such as that guy who came on our radio show and talked about his social engineering. He was doing it for fun. I don't think he made any money. He wound up in jail, but he didn't make any money. So now some of the stuff that, you know, we're all surprised about, that they actually are able to get into government files and all this, you wonder how strategically valuable it really is. Do you have a handle on that?
Well, to really answer that question, you know, you say 50 million fingerprints. What are you going to do with those? Fingerprint is a part of our identity. You have your name, your date of birth, your social security card, and you got your fingerprints. And it kind of goes back to the point that technology is really evolving today, and now we use biometrics to identify a person. So what are those biometrics, right? It's our fingerprints. So now you don't have just a picture of 50 fingerprints, of 50 million fingerprints. You have 50 million identities at hand. So with those, you can fake identities, you can steal other people's information, because that is the most unique identity measure that you have.
Yes, I see. Okay, one other thing before we go too much further is the story of China. When you say it went from what, 1% in 2012 to 40 some odd percent now of the world activity in hacking, it seems to me that that is so enormous that it must be the government. I mean, in the circles of hacking and anti-hacking, doesn't everybody feel that the hacking that comes out of China, and for that matter, North Korea, it's all government anyway. The government is supporting it, training it, providing the machines and the broadband connections. It is essentially a government activity, isn't it?
Well, you have to look at the evolution of the government, how people are moving from being an agricultural country, 60 some years ago, to now being very much industrial and moving towards technology. So I think it has to do with the technological development more so than government endorsing it or giving it some sort of a permission. And it went, just to kind of give a bit more accurate numbers, it was from 13% in 2012 to 41%
Sorry,
today.
13%, yeah.
And in terms of North Korea, I didn't see any data about North Korean cyber attacks. I would imagine that that number is not relevant in the grand scheme of top 10, top 15, or even top 20, simply because of how technology is slow to develop in those regions.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So North Korea doesn't do it on a large scale, does it on a focused scale, but they were able to do it. In this case, they brought a big board company down to its knees, and on a targeted basis, and probably without inside information. They just found a way to behind the firewall or the security wall, if you will, because Sony wasn't protecting itself adequately. So it means that even if you're not in the top 10, you can be pretty dangerous anyway if you have the technology to identify your victims.
But that right there is a coin that has two sides. It could have been North Korea that has originated that hack, or it could have been a grand advertisement about the movie which had to do with North Korea. So it would take a lot of research on the North Korean behalf to tap into something as big as Sony. And I just have a hard time believing that Sony is not as secure as we would imagine it be. But
Okay.
definitely.
All right, that's interesting. So if I'm being hacked, say on that game board that DARPA was showing last night, and I'm an ordinary guy, an ordinary company, how do I know? How do I know that somebody is systematically stealing all my data and putting it to bad use? Do I have to call in somebody to watch, or can I get a junior size DARPA game board to tell me I'm being hacked?
I would imagine that it has to do with your internal IT team, who would be able to kind of always keep in touch with the systems that are in place and monitor, user access. So kind of to tie this back into what it is that I do here at Okta, we would be able to provide you visibility into who uses what applications at what time and from where. So you're having a centralized view of a user, and you would be able to eliminate that threat completely. Because if you see that John Smith, who is not a part of your company, is trying to access your file sharing application, and John Smith does not have appropriate access, you can just deny access to that person and kind of go back and see who was that? Why did this happen? Why did that take place without your files being compromised?
So you can have automated systems that will look for suspicious entry, so to speak, and and then take action, or at least notify you that something is amiss so that you can take action. I can go buy that. I mean, is that something that Okta sells?
Yes, what we have is multi-factor authentication, and it's a pretty neat gadget to have. And I think when I learned about it, it just became my favorite solution that we have in place personally. It would basically mean that when you're in your company, and let's say you have 20 people, and you guys are all there in Hawaii in the plaza, in the headquarters working, and you also have some remote users and people who just go to Starbucks for lunch, and they go on the Starbucks Wi-Fi and they try to access your internal network, again, like the internal applications. You would be able to say, you know what, I don't want these people, like this particular group of people, to access this application outside of my network in the headquarters. So if they're trying to access it, I will just prompt them to verify that they are who they say they are, and they would have to use multi-factor authentication to verify their location, their IP address, and just with the click of a button. So it's a very secure and very seamless experience for the end user, as well as a very great thing to have for your IT.
And it's cheap.
We're not the cheapest solution on the market.
Okay. Well, I mean, you know, Marya, do you think this is going to be the popular solution going forward, that it'll be available to, you know, anybody who has a system of any consequence, and we will all therefore be protected with that kind of system?
Absolutely. Because for as many as identities as you have, you need security. And to name a few of our happy customers, although all of our customers that I've interacted with at least are happy, we work with Western Union, LinkedIn, MGM Resorts, and Rotary International. So, and that's just to name a few big ones.
So can you tell them that they're 100% protected?
I wouldn't be able to say that they're 100% protected, but from the solution that we provide to them, yes.
Okay, well, does that mean, if that's so, and if everybody adopts this kind of technology, does that mean the whole hacking cycle is over, and that hackers might as well, get a real job?
I would hope that the answer to that would be yes. But like I said, as technology gets smarter, so do hackers. And our job is to just keep evolving and to make sure that we close all the gaps in the IT environment.
Yeah, let's assume for a minute that it isn't the end, and there's still some benefit in there to hack information and sell information on the net and all that. And that it continues to spiral that way, between the hackers and the anti-hackers and all that. And the other factor that works is that all of us, everyone in the world, is more dependent on the internet every day for more things in an internet of things, because that is a relentless, trend, relentless. And so my question to you is, aren't the stakes higher every day?
No, absolutely. Absolutely, because everything is becoming digitalized. Your medical records, your driving records, the food that you buy, just everything is going up into the internet space, and people can really start to note the behavioral patterns of your shopping habits, your eating habits, your workout habits, like all of the little applications that are relevant today. How many times a day you work out, how many steps you took in a day. So everything is becoming digital and available to the public, and our job here is to make sure that as it's becoming more and more dangerous for identities out there today, that we keep evolving to make sure that we secure the user and make the end user experience safe.
Okay, Marya, we're going to have to leave it there, but I think you and I should regroup on this and check out the new technology that comes out 6 months from now and see how the hackers are doing and where it's all going, whether it's getting better or worse or the same. That's Marya Dzmitruk, Field Sales Development Representative at Okta, Inc. in San Francisco, and also an HPU alumnus. Thank you so much for appearing on ThinkTech, Marya.
Thank you so much, Jay, for your time.
Aloha.